Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take another look at flow control using if statements in the C programming language. Specifically, this video is part of a larger series of videos that focuses on the fundamentals demo or fundamentals of the C programming language. And this little mini series, if you would, focuses in on the syntax of our if statements, again, in the C programming language. This video assumes that you've gotten a working version of Fundamentals Demo or some other project that you can use to follow along with this particular example, and that you have obtained a copy of the if statements _02.c snips file. I'm going to go through this example a little quicker. So if you have any questions, I encourage you to go back and look at the earlier videos. But I'm going to start off by copying and pasting my function prototype and adding it to my growing list of function prototypes, as well as go ahead and copy and paste the function stub that I provided for you to the end of your fundamentals driver.c. Now, I provided this with some notes in this particular example, and then an example that we're going to follow. This is actually an extension of the previous video that looked at the syntax, the most basic syntax for an if, else, if, or rather an if, else. In this case, we are going to take a look at the if, else, if. The idea is that you probably will have more than one condition that you wish to check. If you need a reminder or to help you understand what I mean by that, if you recall from the earlier video that we basically could only decide if the temperature was greater than 70 degrees that we wished to wear shorts, and if it was less than or equal to 70 degrees, then we took a jacket. It does not allow for a lot of granularity in our decision-making process. And so if anything, what we'd like to do is be able to evaluate multiple conditions. We'll start off with a similar condition where we're going to be checking the temperature, but basically whatever that condition or expression evaluates to, if it evaluates to true, then we run the corresponding block of code underneath that condition. The else if portion simply allows for us to check multiple conditions. So in this particular example, I can actually test two conditions, and if both of those conditions result in a false, well, then we run our else block. So the important thing to note here is that only one condition will run. That does not mean, however, that more than one condition cannot be true. In other words, the first true condition will dictate what block of code will run. In other words, particularly if you have an example where the condition from the if statement as well as the condition from the else if both evaluate to true, once you've dropped down into this block of code, you will not test any further conditions. So likewise, you want to think of the else then as an assumption, if you would, that all of the prior conditions are false. In other words, basically none of the earlier conditions evaluated true, so therefore you run the else. And we will see in later videos, there are some techniques that will allow for you to do some fantastic troubleshooting and validation of your data by simply using the else as a catch-all. But again, that's for later videos. Let's get into a simple example, much like our first one. We again want to use the temperature to determine what type of clothing that we are going to wear. Probably not the best thing in the world to write a C application to choose your clothing for you. But again, these early examples, we have to work with what we've got. So we'll start off with figuring out a variable name for our input value for the temperature. It's going to be an integer value. You want to get into the habit of declaring as well as initializing those values. And then we will simply provide a print statement that says, please enter the current temperature, followed by a new line and your semicolon. And then to collect that information, we're simply going to use a scanf with a %d for the placeholder for an integer, as well as the address of our temperature variable. At this point, then we can go ahead and write the logic that will display to us what article of clothing we will be taking with us depending on the temperature. So we'll start off again, we're going to break it up, kind of arbitrary, but we're going to say if the temperature is less than 50 degrees, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that it's cold. Followed by else if, where we check to see if the temperature is less than 80 degrees. And we'll call this moderate. In other words, it's not too hot. And then finally, we're going to follow this up with an else. And because of the way that I've written this, the only values that will be left will be those values that are greater than or equal to 80. So in other words, I'm going to call that hot. So let's be a little more specific here. What does it mean that it is cold? It's going to be less than 50 degrees. And with the way that we have written this, the moderate temperature is going to be from 50 up to, but not including, 80. And then 80 is going to be, or excuse me, the else is going to be 80 or warmer. Now, again, you're going to see that there's a number of different ways that we can go about doing this. And I'm just trying to offer you some variety in our examples. But let's go ahead and put a print statement here so that we have some functioning code. And we'll say, please take a jacket, or please wear a jacket, followed by a new line. Between 50 and 80, let's say something along the lines of, please wear pants, followed by a new line. And then under the else, again, another print statement, please wear shorts. Now, I think at this point, you can probably agree that this is a little bit of a silly, if not a simple example, and it is intended to be that. The idea here is that it gets you the basic structure of how an if else works. And in this particular example, you could see then only one of these conditions can be evaluated. However, you would agree that if the temperature was 40 degrees, that both the condition of it being less than 50 and the condition of it being less than 80 are true. However, it is because we have written the check for the temperature being less than 50 before the check for the temperature being less than 80 that it becomes the only condition that is in fact validated. Now, to prove that this is in fact the case, let's go ahead and build this to make sure that we don't have any errors in our function. Let's again go back up here to main, and we'll simply just add now the ability to call our if statements underscore O2. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the earlier example. I'm again going to build it, and then we can come out to our command line and we will simply run our fundamentals demo. And sure enough, I'm going to go ahead and put in the value 40, and you'll see that it tells me to please take a jacket. However, if I put in a value, something like 55, it's going to tell me to please wear pants. And then if I put in 90 because it's hot, it says please wear shorts. And again, this is meant to be a simple, if not fun example here. We encourage you to dig into it a little bit further, maybe add a few more else if statements in here so you can understand how you can refine this clothing selection even more. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.